Good morning. Welcome to The Human Author. My name is Jen Cantwell, and today I'm going to be reading chapter 21 from my book, The Warning, which is part of the Light Chaser series. You can learn more about the series at my author website, which is jbcantwell.com. One note on scheduling: next week on Friday, that is the 26th, I will not be here, so there won't be a live stream that week. But the following week, which is on June 2nd, that Friday, June 2nd, I will be, and I'll be reading 3 chapters that day. Today, I am reading just 1 chapter because life just sort of got in the way this week. But I am hard at work on continuing. So here we go. Chapter 21. And just a little note from behind it. We would make it out alive. It was a promise I made silently to myself, to my friends, and to that terrible man who awaited us. But regardless of my desires and intentions, I couldn't let myself forget that most people in Eagle View were probably on the lookout for me. I supposed that when I finally arrived home, a reckoning would accompany me. It would certainly become clear who was on my side and who wasn't. Would people be willing to lay down their lives to defend me? I thought back to Kara and the Lucents, her tiny army of slight warriors. I knew they were tougher than they looked, but they followed her, not me. And what about those saved Oak Forest? My stomach dropped at this thought, reminding me of Colm's violent end at my hands. As ever, I was irrationally worried that somehow the information would get back to Enya and the rest about what I had done. Nobody would follow me now, not if they knew. My body felt a wash of regret and shame. I wondered if, somewhere out there, Torin knew everything. Wouldn't it make it easy for him to torment me? Were his spies littered across the entire land? I didn't encounter anyone else along the road back toward Eagle View. It wasn't a road, really, but a slim path through the grasses. As the sun began to set, I suggested to the others that we take a break. We would need to be out of the line of sight to anyone watching from Eagle View, and with sunset would come the curfew, perhaps the most dangerous time of night for one to be out. Nobody argued, and we all dropped to our stomachs in the grass, peeling off our traveling packs. Brennen onto his back and looked up at the sky, the color blue mixing with pinks and yellows. I watched him as he watched the clouds, and I tried to think of the last time I'd found beauty out in the world. It seemed like it must have been a very long time ago. I glanced up at the clouds as he did, but I found I was too anxious to just lay there. I wondered if that meant my days of appreciating anything that might fill one with wonder were over. I pulled my bag around and dug deep within it until my fingers grasped the book. Pulling it out, it almost automatically opened to the single page with a single name scrawled in blood red ink. Mine. Kenneth looked over my shoulder. Still no change? No. I wonder what he did to it. What do you mean? He asked. I sighed, looking up at him. It didn't used to be empty like this. There were names, hundreds of them, almost all of them scratched out. Torin's son, Bevan, told me that his father had killed everyone in the book, everyone but me. It must be possessed then, Brennen said. He held one hand across his brow, shielding his eyes from the lowering sun. What do you mean? I asked. Well, your name is the last line. Does that mean you would be the last kill? What about this book? Where did it even come from? I don't know the answers to all of your questions, but you've made me think of something. I've been wondering this whole time why he hasn't simply had someone else kill me for him. There must be he has to do it himself. What could it be? It seems he must be in grave danger. Without me, he can't complete the work he's begun. What a mess. I felt like I had no choices at all. Certainly none that would result in any level of happiness or even a tolerable life. As I moved through the motions, walked forward toward what appeared to be my destiny, I became less and less certain that I would survive any of this. But I had to take comfort with the reality that, for whatever reason, he had to find me and he had to kill me by himself. That didn't mean, however, that I couldn't be injured. Maybe it was his idea to have his minions attack me, but then hold back at the last moment, clearing the way for him to walk in and make the final kill. What a coward. Suddenly, I wanted nothing more than to jump up from my hiding place and scream out into the night. You fool! You can't do it yourself, can you? You have everyone else to do the dirty work for you. And where are you? Some hole somewhere, surrounded by your forced army. This idea struck me as I heard my silent voice inside my head. Forced army. Certainly, there were people out in the world who had evil in the centers of their hearts, but that didn't make up for the fact that Torrhen's greatest army, the Wicks, did not. They were simply possessed, and they had no existing drive to hunt me other than his insistence that they do so. My army, however, fought with their whole hearts, bruised, some aching, but all pure. That didn't mean I couldn't be hurt by them, or that I even had a good chance, or no, wait, or that even I had a good heart beating in my chest. Hadn't I proven that my heart could hold malice just as anyone else's might? But it was different. I knew that. I felt ashamed of what I'd done, and not just with Colm. There had been others over the past several months whom I'd let down in different sorts of ways. But I was not a temple of secrets. Suddenly, I realized what I needed to do. I sat up in the grass, but Kenneth grabbed onto my arm and pulled me down into the dirt again. Are you crazy? He asked. It's not time yet. You'll be seen. I didn't care about that danger, but I cared that Kenneth did. So I rolled over onto my back and took in the view Brennen had been talking about just a few moments before. I need to tell you something, I said quietly. We're about to enter a most dangerous situation, and you need to know whom you're following. The pink cloud slid across the sky, and lying there calmed me. I killed a man. It was a man who didn't deserve it, a man who was trying to help me, but I did it all on my own. Kenneth looked over, frowning, but I kept my eyes on the sky. What happened? He asked. I shrugged, a gesture nowhere near strong enough to describe the act. He took something I wanted. I was like a child. He stole it from me, and I took out my revenge on him. Hot tears running down the sides of my face, pooling in my ears, my nose stuffy. He didn't deserve it, I went on. He was a good man, and when the others find out, they will all leave me behind. No one will ever trust me again. I know it. I rolled over onto my side and looked Kenneth in the eye. So you see, when sometimes I want to go off on my own, it's because I'm certain I could never be good enough to win this war. I should let others, braver men and women, be the glory that will come with Torrhen's death. Because what will happen if it is me? If I am the one to kill Torrhen, will my doing it undo the harm I've brought to others? Kenneth looked deep in thought at this question, and I wasn't sure what to make of his silence. Finally, he rolled over onto his stomach, propping his head up with his elbows. Should I be frightened of you? I paused, not ready to answer this question, because what would my answer be? There was only one option. Yes, I finally said. It would be safer for you to travel on your own. I would insist upon it if it meant you could survive without the food and water I can provide. What did he take from you? But I thought he already knew. Just keep me away from the light, I said. It brings a certain danger to me, taps into the darkest parts of me. And once I get going on it, the only thing to make me stop is if it runs out completely. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I've seen how you guarded it before we drank the last of it. It's powerful stuff. How did it happen? When did you learn about your dependence? I was surprised by it myself, I said. Before we made it to Zamira, we came across the remnants of a keeper. I was being chased by a group of soldiers. and it was their task to capture me and bring me back to the veiled kingdom. But when we made it to the keeper and saw all of that light, none of us could resist. Drank our fill, including me. Maybe that was enough to turn me. I'm not sure. Brennen was listening quietly, his gaze no longer on the sky. He rolled onto his side. Well, it's gone now. Yes, I said, but Zahn is known for keeping an entire fountain full of light up in the tower of Eagleview's castle. I'm not sure what I'll do if I'm able to gain access to it. Well, what happened last time? Kenneth asked. It must be a huge amount of power. Yes, and a huge amount of greed to go along with that power. But what were you able to do differently when you'd had so much light? Were you a better sorceress? I shrugged. I don't think it enhanced my abilities very much, but it did allow me to live through difficult situations, times where there were no food, times when I needed healing and couldn't find anyone to do the job for me. One by one, those aren't necessarily bad things, Brennen said. I looked over at him. You're forgetting the main bad thing, the way my desire for the stuff creates anger and jealousy within me. All of the things that Torin wants, all of my struggles are like a fine wine to him. You don't know that, Kenneth said. You have clues, hints, and artifacts that they are formidable, but we don't know how much Torin understands about what we're doing. He might know that we're headed back to Eagleview, but he doesn't necessarily know why. I looked at him, confused. All I'm saying is that maybe while we wait for the sun to set and darkness to come, we should give this more thought. What do Torin and Zahn expect from us? They think we're going for my family and Regan. Yes, so what if we don't? This idea surprised me. It hadn't crossed my mind at all, the possibility of thwarting those in charge and pretending my family wasn't in danger. Because what might have happened to them at that point? Was it even something I could help them with? Maybe not. Okay, I said. What do we do instead? Well, I guess I'd figured we would find somewhere to hide, just check things out for a few days. Things were just starting to change when I left. I don't know what we might expect now. My heart was beating hard, and I looked over at him, wanting to ask the question I wasn't sure I should. Finally, after several long moments, I spoke what had come to be my greatest desires. Do you ever think about just leaving? Like for good? I've traveled and I don't want to travel, Brennen said unexpectedly. Eagleview's the only home I've ever known, and my life without Regan isn't the same. He looked down at his hands, wringing them nervously. I looked to Kenneth. And you? What keeps you coming back here? He also looked down, picking a blade of grass and splitting it with his fingernails. There's nothing for me, he began, but it is my home, and it's yours too. I guess I thought that maybe if we were able to survive it all, both of us, that we might have a chance to get to know one another. Even with his dark tanned skin, I could see the flush running from his neck up to his cheeks. I wasn't sure what to say to this, but the truth was I was beginning to wonder about Kenneth. All those years we'd grown up alongside one another had resulted in a most unexpected friendship. Everything before had been kid stuff, but now I was left with someone I knew I could trust. Well, let's do what we can to get the kingdom back, I said. It's not going to be easy. Kenneth smirked. It never is. Once night finally fell in earnest, the three of us got up from our hiding spots in the grass and made our way toward the east side of the city. Not surprisingly, I could see lawmen pacing atop the outer wall, but none of them seemed to see. At first, this made me nervous. What was it that was keeping them from sounding the alarm about our approach? Then, as we were nearing the picking fields, I realized they were possessed. put there as deterrence. I couldn't imagine to know why they weren't operating on their own steam. Had they put up some sort of fight? My experience with lawmen was almost always that they were a greedy yet loyal bunch. They were men who enjoyed violence and control. I imagined that those things had been held up for them like a carrot on a string. Whoever it was who was possessing them now, they'd made sure these men had been distracted first. Maybe a simple promise before going under had been enough. I stood up straight, no longer afraid. "What are you doing?" Kenneth said, taking my hand and trying to pull me back down into the grass. "You'll be seen." I knelt down beside him, pulling out the scope and handing it to him. "See for yourself," I said. "Movements aren't natural. It's like the men in the oak grove. They're up there to distract us, but I don't think we're in much danger." He took the scope away from his eye and handed it to Brennen. "You could be right, but we shouldn't take chances. We have time, and we should be careful." Brennen held out the scope to me. "But don't you see the kids?" he asked. I frowned, holding up the scope again, but this time when I swept it across the castle wall, I saw an unmistakable group of little heads peeking out from the windows below. Who were they? Prisoners? Orphans? Would they go running to Zahn or Torin with the news that we'd finally arrived back home? "You're right," I said. "Both of you. So what do we do?" "The picking fields are ahead, so I say we stay low until we make it there. Hopefully your friends will be willing to help." I hoped the same thing myself. Finally, we went ahead and on our way to the fields, occasionally using the scope to keep track of the children. So far, none of them had moved, and nearly all of them looked tired. I wondered how they were being kept appeased. I hoped for their safety, regardless of how they were being used, even if their entire purpose was just to find me. I knew they didn't deserve it. After another 20 minutes of laying low, we finally made it to the outskirts of the picking fields. Tired from leaning over, all three of us stopped and lay down in the dirt. We were almost out of view of the children and the puppets of the lawmen on the wall above. The moon was close to the horizon, and soon its light would no longer help the other side find us. "How long should we wait?" Kenneth asked. "You can wait as long as you like," a small voice said from behind us. "But in my experience, hiding during the darkest hours is the smartest thing to do." I flipped over, ready to fight, even though I thought I recognized that voice. When I finally saw his face, he wore a wide smirk. "Adair." I breathed an enormous sigh of relief. "You scared me," I said. "Why are you standing there instead of hiding?" He shrugged. "They don't care about us. It's you they want. If I had to guess, I'd say they've made a mistake in thinking that we don't know each other. But look," he pointed, "the kids don't even see. We've done a good job of hiding ourselves in these fields. It just takes a little bit of practice to dodge out of sight." "Do you have somewhere where we can talk?" I asked. "Somewhere safe?" He smiled. "Sure, I'll show you." He led us from pile to pile, stopping every few minutes with his finger over his lips to shush us. My heart beat fast in my chest when I heard the sound of hoofbeats in the distance. "I guess they're not all possessed," I said. Adair looked back at me scornfully, then put his finger to his lips again. I got the message. There was only one horse, and as he slowed his mount to a walk, he became very difficult to hear properly. This one, I was sure, was not possessed. I expected his sharp gaze to fall upon us at any moment, but then I heard a sound in the distance, a cry. I heard a man pull up the horse. I heard a man pull the horse around and gallop off toward the direction of the sound. Adair chuckled. "They're such suckers. It happens every time." He shook his head in that old man way I'd seen times before. Still, he didn't stand up straight. Instead, he crouched down, and we all began running again. I was too frightened to ask questions, keenly aware of the danger we were all putting ourselves in. I trusted Adair, though, and I knew that wherever he was taking us, we would find safety. Finally, we reached the lowest of the piles, maybe only 2 feet taller than the dirt. He lay down upon his belly and scooted his way toward a small opening I wouldn't have noticed standing. A moment later, his feet disappeared and his head popped up. "It's safe in here," he said. "They never look over here. They always look in the bigger piles, but they're just decoys." He smiled again, and I couldn't help but think that Adair was my new favorite person. I made the others go first, too much grumbling on the part of Kenneth. I can protect us if someone comes," I said. "Now get in there before someone sees you." He scowled at me, but then shimmied his way into the underground passageway Adair and his friends had created. It was my turn, the last of us, but I took a quick look around before climbing in myself. The men atop the wall kept up their automatic movements, pacing but seeing nothing. The children's heads were pointed in another direction, and I wondered if one of them had seen something. I wondered if one of them had seen me and was now pointing the group to look away. Then the sound of hoofbeats made it to my ears once again, and there was nothing for it. I quickly scooted my way into the opening, and despite the smell of rotting garbage, I found myself in a cavern crafted by children's hands. Up above, the horse's hooves trotted by, pausing as the rider looked around. For a moment, I thought all was lost, but then the horse moved away, and I let go of a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Someone took my hand in theirs, and I looked down to find Adair. "Follow me." That is all I have for today. Just a reminder that I will not be here next week, but I'll be back on June 2nd. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you're enjoying it. If you have any comments, you can email me at jen@thehumanauthor.com. Have a great weekend.